This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion. India's growth story continues. The participants are A.K. Bhattacharya, economic analyst, and Shishir Sinha, journalist.
Mr. Bhattacharya, we have seen GDP number and there are some doubts raised on whether we are seeing more of a base effect or real recovery. What is your opinion on that?
There is certainly some recovery. When you see the economy growing by 8.4% compared to contraction of 7.4% in the same quarter of last year, which is July-September 2020, and now we are in July-September 2021, when economy grows by 8.4%, there is certainly some recovery. You cannot detract from that movement. But what is also necessary to measure is the size of the economy. Because as we know that the size of the economy in real terms had actually shrunk quite significantly in last year in July-September from, if I compare the size of the economy in July-September 2019, the size of Indian economy in that quarter in real terms was 35.61 lakh crore. Now that slumped to around 32.96 lakh crore. And now what we see in July-September 2021, it has come back to around 35.73 lakh crore. So what you are seeing is that we are at that stage of the economy in terms of the real size, which is broadly similar to what we had in July-September 2019. So almost 2 years ago, we had this size. Now, while we must take note of the recovery from a contraction of 7.4% in July-September 2022, growth of 8.4%, we should also take note of the fact that the size of the economy is by and large remained the same for the last 2 years. So this has its own implications. This has its own bearing on the kind of jobs that we can create. So therefore, it's a two-way story. It cannot be seen just as a recovery, but also a recovery to a point where are we better off than 2 years ago? No. But we have recovered. There's no doubt about it.
The second thing is that the government is saying that we will end this year with double-digit growth, while most of the agencies have forecasted a growth rate of, say, 8.59% to 9.5%. What is the number which you think it would be more appropriate considering the two-quarter number? The first quarter, we grew by over 20%. The second quarter, we grew by over 8%. So what is the number for full fiscal in your estimation?
See, my point is that is only the brave who would try to speculate what kind of growth that you will see in the full year in the current 21 and 2022, April to March. What we do know so far is that in the first half of the Indian economy of the current year, we have grown by 13.7%. Now, the third and the fourth quarter of 2021 financial year, we had some positive growth. So in other words, the base effect advantage that we had in the first two quarters will not be there in the third and the fourth quarter of the current year. So that is one big factor that we must keep in mind. The second big factor we must keep in mind is the manner in which the new variants of COVID-19 may play havoc with the pace of economic activity in the next few months, which will be very crucial because the third quarter, we are in the last month of the third quarter, and we have to see through all the 3 months of the fourth quarter. Now, in October and November, we have seen smart recovery. Even if you go into the GST numbers and even the pace of the economic activity, the high frequency indicators, the Indian economy did quite well. But remember that last year also at the same time, the Indian economy had recovered and actually had gone into positive growth territory. So if you want to go in for double-digit growth for the current year, you have to grow very, very significantly in the third quarter and the fourth quarter. 8.4% growth will not be enough. So you have to really increase your growth rates to close to 9 or 9.5%. Now, whether that kind of a growth achievement is possible in the third and the fourth quarter, given the threats that we are seeing out of the Omicron variant of COVID-19, and most importantly, what has been the trajectory of private consumption. The trajectory of private consumption has not been very good. If you look at it in terms of nominal size of the economy, the private final consumption expenditure continues to stay at around 56.6% of the economy, which is lower actually than 57% in the first half of last year. So in other words, private consumption is yet to get better than what we were doing last year. The government's final consumption expenditure, and the government plays a big role, is also lower than what used to be last year. Now, this is in terms of current prices. So therefore, unless the consumption side of the economy comes back to its original trajectory of close to around 58-59%, and actually in the good years we used to have 60% of private consumption. Now, unless we recover our consumption to that level, I would be a little worried about projecting growth rate for the full year in the double digit. I would rather be conservative and say that the Reserve Bank of India estimate of 9.5% is probably more realistic. Even though it crosses the double digit mark, as an Indian, I would be feeling very happy.
Along with the GDP number, we had another number that is about the fiscal deficit, showing that what the government is earning and how much it is spending. And we are seeing it is almost a little over one third of budget estimate. Still, there is a doubt that we will not be able to stick to the fiscal deficit of 6.8% or 15.1 lakh crore as projected in the budget. It could go up by 20 basis points, 10 to 20 basis points. Do you agree with this view?
Now, it's clear that the government's both tax revenue and non-tax revenues have done well in the first 7 months of the current financial year. As of now, given the pace of expenditure, the fiscal deficit seems to be well under control. But you have to also acknowledge that the government has made some commitment of incurring additional expenditure, particularly by extending the Pradhan Mantri Food Kalyan program. It's supposed to end in November, but that has been extended to March. Now, in other words, you have incurred an additional expenditure of 53,000 crore for the year. Now, taken together, this will be close to around 2 lakh crore of expenditure, which was not initially budgeted for. You have additional load of expenditure because of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program. There is an additional almost 50,000 crore of fertilizer subsidy commitment that the government will have to fulfill in the current year. There is also an additional load on the government expenditure for clearing the export incentive dues, almost around 55,000 crore. So now all these expenditures have not been really budgeted for. So I am actually keenly looking forward to the supplementary demand for grants that the Finance Ministry will be presenting in this winter session to actually get a sense that what has been the additional expenditure that the government has already committed to. And my reading is that the additional expenditure already been committed will probably be a little more, not less, than the extra revenues that the government will be getting. Also remember that the government's disinvestment proceeds, which were supposed to be 1.75 lakh crore, may fall short of its target. So taken together, the additional expenditure on food, subsidies, and export incentive schemes, and the shortfall in disinvestment proceeds will take care of the additional benefits that we have got by way of higher tax and non-tax revenues by way of the RBI dividend. So I won't be surprised if our fiscal deficit is close to what's projected in the budget and may even exceed a couple of percentage, 100 basis points or less than that. Maybe 6.8 may go up to 6.9 or even 7. But that should not worry us really at a time when government's fiscal rectitude has not been really ever been doubt, in the sense that this government has maintained its fiscal prudence right through, and a little bit of slippage in a year when you require some sort of transfer of resources to the poor and the needy after COVID-19 impact is not a bad idea. So fiscal deficit slippage is not a cause for worry, although my sense is that it would be very minor slippage. So that's what it seems to be panning out.
I think we should also add the additional cost of vaccination because whatsoever has been provided in the budget, it is likely to go up by 20,000 crore, 55,000 crore. Wednesday, we saw two high-frequency indicators for the month of November. That was the Purchasing Manager Index for manufacturing sector, and the second was the GST collection. And GST collection, in fact, is the second all-time highest. And even the PMI manufacturing is a 10-month high. One of the good things which has happened in the PMI manufacturing we can talk about is the employment opportunities. How do you see that? Because that is one area where there are a lot of concerns, even after high growth, even after high tax collection. The employment situation is something which needs to be talked more. What is your assessment on that?
I think there are some positive signs showing on the employment front, even though those are dated numbers. If you look at labor force participation rate data, PLFS data, which has been released for the period January to March 2021, it does show that employment slowly and steadily are coming back. There are sectoral variations, but I think we are seeing employment on a better trajectory. And I think this is linked to our exports, which are doing very well. Exports, particularly of manufactured and raw materials, actually by and large very, very job labor intensive sectors. Now exports clocking a rate of growth of 40% in the first half or so has also helped the job situation, although you may still argue that the unorganized sector workers may not have fully benefited from this formal sector growth. But the big question is, to what extent the Omicron variant of the COVID-19 pandemic, they actually impact on India's pace of economic activity, the various sectors of the economy like travel, tourism, hotels, and consumption particularly. And do people go back to their own shelves of low consumption and more savings in their banks? So that will hold key to the kind of positive signs and capitalizing on those positive signs of higher GST collections and better employment situation. They will depend on that.
Another concern area is the inflation. Of course, the number which we are seeing through CPI or WPI, they are different. On the ground, it is different one. Globally, we are seeing some surge in the metals and mineral prices. Of course, the oil prices are slightly on a higher side, but because of the release from the strategic reserve by major consumers, we are seeing some kind of cooling down, not very completely cooling down. What is your assessment on inflation?
My sense is that inflation is a problem which I think the government and both the RBI will have to tackle for a few more months. Even though the CPI, as you rightly pointed out, is within the higher tolerance band of 6%, but the wholesale price is still at an uncomfortably high level of around 10-11%. That is not a good sign. Consumer price index, the CPI, the retail inflation, being at the upper end of 5 to 6%, does not give confidence to the managers of the Indian economy. So I would be surprised if the Reserve Bank of India in its monetary policy review meeting next week do not come out with a policy stance that ceases to be very accommodative, probably starts the rate increase process by first increasing the reverse repo rate and then go into the repo rate increase. So if the interest rates go up, they will be a clear sign that the government as well as RBI are no longer very comfortable with the inflation trajectory that they see taking shape in the coming months. So yes, inflation is going to be a cause for concern. You may have already read the statement of the US Fed Reserve Chairman, Mr. Jerome Powell, on inflation no longer being a transitory problem. So it has become deep-rooted. You look at the European Central Bank, they are taking a position that inflation is a problem. So I think inflation is going to be a global problem and also an Indian problem. And policies will have to respond to this huge challenge because they can really be a spoil sport.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya.
Thank you.
You are listening to a discussion. India's growth story continues. The participants were A.K. Bhattacharya, economic analyst, and Shishir Sinha, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.